This video will contain minor to major spoilers, but do not worry, I will warn you when the time comes where my discussion will contain major plot points and devices. The story follows the young witch twin siblings Danny and Dorian White who have missed their school bus to their magic school. Not wanting to get scolded by their parents for missing their first year of school, they attempt to find a mentor for themselves. The narrative then follows the siblings' adventures and mishaps as they learn from their newfound mentor and mingle with their friends. We have Dorian White, who unlike his twin sister is an intelligent but socially awkward kid. He prefers to study than interact with other people, but he does ineptly try to make friends. On the other hand, we have Daniela White, or Danny for short, who unlike his twin brother is not that studious but is more outgoing. She is easily able to make friends while her brother lags behind in that aspect. Both are powerful witches, but unlike Dorian, Danny is incompetent at performing the right spells, though she is kind of suggested to be more powerful than Dorian. As they live out their youth, little did they know that behind the scenes, the leaders of the witch world have been concocting some plans against the non-magical human. The first few mini chapters may make the comic seem to be a simply slice-of-life fantasy story, however it indeed has a plot. The story will later deal with many deep themes and messages of innocence, prejudice, chain of hatred, and atrocities, so spoilers. The lore and world building of the series are explored mostly through the characters' actions and interactions. A number of webtoons produce cheap expositions through the use of descriptions and narrations, hence it's a truly refreshing take to simply being placed and exposed to the world through the characters' lenses. This comic also contains many references from grim fairy tale stories such as Snow White and Little Red Riding Hood, but with the author's own twist. It's only labeled with fantasy in its genre, but it is one of the best romantic progressions that I have read in my opinion. Having a romance subplot in stories with solid plots is almost a plus for me because I generally find the romance in plot-oriented stories better than romance in romance-oriented stories. While it has action and fight scenes, this webtoon is not primarily an action series, therefore do not expect to see action and fight sequences that you'd normally find in action webtoons, nor expect also to see a clearly defined power system. The series is one of the most creative panelings ever done in a webtoon. Panelings in most webtoons and manhwa are monotonous, and while I understand that it is to make reading with mobile phones easier, they are oftentimes a waste of space. I cannot help but admire the detail and artistic effort, especially the utilization of long panels to map out the situation of the area and the occurring event. The color palette, however, was not to my liking in the first few chapters because I do not find them vibrant, but I find them overall relatively good for me as the series progressed, but I believe this is just a matter of personal preference. And if you were already thinking about it, the twins definitely bear a resemblance from the twins of Gravity Falls, Dipper Pines, the nerdy and socially inept boy, and Mabel Pines, the more socially outgoing but not that bright in the head girl. Just like Mabel, Danny is also prone to making disasters while her brother finds a way to fix things. This was made by Miriam Bonestreteur, I apologize if I pronounce her name wrong, but when asked about her inspiration from the series in an interview, she mentions Harry Potter, Avatar, etc. but never mentions anything about Gravity Falls, including in the Q&A chapter. So who knows really? Plus, having twins with a brain and brawn is not that uncommon in other series. Moreover, the twins may give the same vibes from the twins of Gravity Falls, but they are completely different in character. Before you continue any further into this video, you might want to check the series out if you have gotten interested in it, because starting from now, I will be giving my personal opinion of the series, which will contain minor to major spoilers, and I will be treating like if guys already read the story. First of all, I guess I want to share that I was kind of attracted to this webtoon because of the poster girl, but when I watched the series, I thought the poster was a scam. The long black-haired young lady was nowhere to be found. It was only during the time skip that I realized that she was an older version of Danny. But rather, she was the older Danny. I was kind of surprised and a bit disappointed how I never thought of it and how my mind basically skipped the part of her nightmare where she saw her older self. Moving on to the main topic, I have to say first that this webtoon's plot is one of the best messages about war. Just like in Attack on Titan, we are to realize that oftentimes there is really no good or evil side in war. War may have been caused by the country's leaders' greed, political agenda, vengeance, and a few other reasons, but we must remember that the soldiers and warriors are just people of different sides. The war in the series is between the magical people and the non-magical people. Some people, especially in the magical side, had nothing against the non-magical humans but were forced and dragged into such acts of violence and oppression. War in the series has been a product of the chain and cycle of hate and revenge. How things have escalated to this degree was a result of a chain reaction which started from actions of either one side or both sides since long ago. The dialogue between our main characters with the king and queen of the non-magical side about how it was futile to pinpoint the blame solely on someone or a specific side was very relevant. Conflict and hate between the two sides have started since long forgotten, and I don't think it was even discussed, and probably no one knows exactly how it started. Perhaps truly some of the witches started this with the use of their dark arts, or regular people have accused witches of some things they did not commit because they wanted a reason to subdue them out of fear or inferiority. Perhaps both are true. The king and queen of one of the kingdoms of the non-magical side, the parents of Monica, have tried to bring peace by banning the culture of burning witches at the stake. This was, however, violated by the king of the Allied Kingdom, the father of William, who had a strong prejudice against witches. He captured a family of witches and tried to burn a pregnant witch, Angela White, who was at the time carrying both Dorian and Danny in her belly. From this incident, Angela changed drastically, and the acting leaders of the witches' side, including the White family, have concocted plans against the non-magical kingdoms. Putting all the blame towards William's father, however, is not simple, as the friction has always been there. Monica's father was the one who stopped the practice of death by burning at the stake, but it was pointed out that it was him who began the eradications of witches. It's either due to a mistranslation or my faulty memory, but it likely meant to say that it was the previous kings who started it. I apologize, I never got to clarify this because I could not find the chapter where the dialogue occurred. In between this conflict, however, our main characters were torn apart, especially Dana and Dorian, as they did not really want to choose a side. Their family was one of the acting leaders, or rather the acting leaders of the witches' side. However, they did not want war. From what they've experienced, they know that not all humans are bad, just as not all witches are bad, and they wanted both sides to reconcile. This is not only true for them, but for all the people, both magical and non-magical, who wanted nothing against the other side and just want reconciliation and peace. Amongst our main characters, I was especially amazed by Monica. Her parents, the king and queen, were killed by Danny's mother Angela. However, she was willing to cast aside her feelings of vengeance because she knows and understands very well the fundamental cycle of hatred, and that the only way to avoid this kind of atrocities in the future, war and hate must be stopped and the age of peace and harmony must be ushered. However, despite my positive feedbacks about the messages of war in this comic, it may have only been me, but I was barely able to feel the consequences and devastation of the war and skirmishes on the two sides because I believe there was a lack of allocation and emphasis on its impact and implications on the different aspects of society before and after the time skip. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I was disappointed with the magical system in the series. It was never explained much how magic works in this world. Unless I actually miss a chapter or a page, then that would greatly be my mistake. Together with Danny and Dorian, Nico and Monica tried to learn magic from Master Pendragon, but to their dismay, they could barely cast any spell. However, Monica became good at flying with brooms and specialized in making potions, which often, if not all the time, doesn't really require the use of magic as long as you have the recipe. Nico, on the other hand, is not a natural at flying brooms or at casting spells, but has a specialized skill that allows him to see the future through the crystal ball like his master Pendragon. And later in the series, in the Era of Peace, when teaching kids to learn magic, teacher Dorian says that some can use magic naturally while some can barely, while some cannot. However, I never really got to understand the logic behind what it took to cast a spell, ride a broom, or have specialized abilities. While we can leave the explanation to a person's affinities, I kind of find that explanation a bit lacking. But still, I believe the ability to naturally use magic is most likely inherited, meaning that children whose family have magical backgrounds are most likely to have an advantage compared to those who do not have. However, nothing was really discussed regarding the requirements and criteria in using different magical abilities, like how curses are made, and how Nico has the same abilities as Master Pendragon, who is not even his biological relative. Whether it was a coincidence or something else, I do not know. I especially had questions regarding Master Pendragon's abilities. The author failed to explore, or at least failed to convey to the audience, the fundamental matters regarding his ability to foresee the fragments of the future through his crystal glass. Master Pendragon knew that among the twins of the White family, one will be selected as a king or queen to lead the witches. He wanted to stop this event because he knew this was one of the requirements that led to the war that was going to transpire in the near future. Knowing how kind and innocent the kids were, he held off his plan to kill them, hoping for a better outcome. He however changed his mind, and in the process of trying to poison Dorian, the prophecy was instead fulfilled with Dani becoming the queen as she grew colder and distant over seeing her brother burned at the stake. Of course, it was only a dummy of Dorian, but there was no proof that Dorian was alive, because even though the poison was unable to kill Dorian, he was placed into a coma-like condition and was gone for about 3 years before the gang found him in the wilderness. It was too late by then, and Dani had already placed herself into a curse. But what is exactly the extent of Master Pendragon's abilities? Were there any previous instances that he was able to prevent what he had predicted? Or in the end, things are just meant to be like some sort of fate and destiny, where the outcome will still roughly lead in the same direction, just like how his prophecy of Monica went? Was it then futile to attempt to change the future? To attempt to kill both Dani and Dorian? Whether Dani becoming the Witch Queen was a self-fulfilling prophecy or just a prophecy that will occur either way even without intervention. And in the case that Dani died, would it have been Dorian that becomes the Witch King? I have no idea. For something that wasn't a minor plot device, this was never clarified even before or after the time skip. While I know this is not really an action-oriented series as I have mentioned before, I cannot help but find the fight between wizards monotonous. It didn't really deviate that much from the Harry Potter movie series, which only had one wizard battle that captivated me, which was Dumbledore versus Voldemort in the Order of the Phoenix. The rest of the Harry Potter movies, the fights were dull. Not much creativity was involved. They are almost no different from stormtroopers that just use laser beams. I do not mean that a comic needs to emphasize and focus on battle and fight scenes, but with magic there are just a lot of possibilities. I understand however why Dorian chose to use the same magic spell over and over again in his first battle against many adult wizards, because his goal is to incapacitate them and not kill them. But the adult wizards, no excuses. Sure, they're not battle wizards, but don't they at least know some creative spells to get hold of Dani and Dorian? Are there no homing spells or whatever that allows you to target your enemy with your missile or laser beams? I know that the White family were deemed as powerful magicians, but I just had no idea that the average adult wizards were just so pathetic. I cannot remember a time where they actually hit Dorian or something, especially during the first big battle. If there was, it was not that memorable. It was difficult at first to gauge how much of a genius and powerful Dorian and Dani were, because there were no adult wizards, especially of their age, to compare to. But seeing as to how the average adult can barely put up with them, made me just find them immeasurable. Just imagine if the twins were actually trained in combat. Now let's move on from that. Among our main characters, I find that Monica, in my opinion, has the best character development in the series, from that spoiled, demanding, mean, living in her own fairy tale princess to a woman who acknowledges and confronts her realities, sorrows, and emotions. With optimism and compassion, she continues to drive forward to bring the peace and harmony that she dreamt of along with her parents and friends. Partnered with Dorian White, they have one of the best romantic developments I've ever read in a story. Despite Monica having a deprecatory attitude towards Dorian during their initial interactions, Dorian never stopped being kind and gentle towards her. In time, however, she grew to respect and admire Dorian. There were a few and many falls, denials, and misunderstandings along the way, but it was delightful and gratifying to see them develop and acknowledge their own true feelings. The denial part is especially true with Monica, who at the start believed she was in love with William, her fiancé, and was afraid that her heart was being swayed. Her biggest fear was admitting that she was in love with Dorian. Inspired by romantic novels, she attempted to look for her true love in her younger days, but gradually settled for Will because her escapades failed, and that's why before she met Dorian, her first worries were that she did not have true love for William. But on her way to save Will, who was captured and held by witches and whom she believed was her true love, she found her true love with Dorian instead. Speaking of relationships, I never thought that the relationship between Damian White, the older brother of the twins, and William would escalate to being lovers. I am honestly not a fan of boys' love, but I also have nothing against it, because I believe that everyone has their own rights to choose their relationship as long as they do not violate and trample on others. Going back to the story, Damian has always been in love with William. That goes much deeper than just being friends. But I never really knew how William would take it. I do not know if it's clear for you guys and the other readers, but William's feelings for Monica were also never clear to me. I do not know whether he married her simply out of obligation and duty or that he also actually held some kind of feelings for her. He, after all, showed a bit of annoyance toward Dorian after Monica's confession. Either way, William and Monica's relationship was platonic and William eventually respected Monica's love for Dorian. Moreover, he chose Damien towards the end. While William and Monica agreed to keep the relationships a secret and become open to the public with their divorce once the kingdom situations have stabilized, it was both funny and interesting to see William casually flirt with Damien in front of the servants while Monica have secret dates with Dorian. Sometimes I forget the fact that he was mentally 2 to 3 younger than the others. He was after all placed in a coma-like condition after the few chapters dedicated to Dorian's adjustments after his return from his disappearance. This fact was kind of not brought up again. He was 12 or 13 when he slept and woke up in a 15 or 16-year-old body. It would have undoubtedly been interesting to see Dorian adjust not just to his drastically changed environment but also with his body, especially his young raging hormones. Not just from blushing after seeing Monica who's become a beautiful young lady. Jokes aside, Dorian is just too innocent for that. Regarding the supporting characters, I wish the likes of Mark, Aisha, Monica's friends, and Nico's friends were further given their focus. The focus of the story was more on our main characters like Danny, Dorian, Monica, and Nico. Even Damien and William had their own time of focus. While the likes of Mark and Aisha had a good amount of screen time, they've never really had their spotlight, and we've never really seen their perspective. I find Mark a cool guy to be friends with. Aside from being extremely handsome, he's just generally a regular chill and nice dude. He's mature, level-headed, and unknowingly a teaser. However, I never got to know him more and realize his thoughts. The closest one I can think of was when we were shown his nightmare, which was about a world where magic doesn't exist. I may be wrong on this one, but I do not remember a time where I ever heard a monologue. He was there, but oftentimes I felt like he was just there. Among our characters, I was personally annoyed by Nico's character the most. I still had tolerance when Nico showed a spiteful attitude towards Dorian and Mark because it was obvious for me that it came from jealousy and inferiority. Many of us have an inferiority complex and that is especially true for me, but unlike Nico though, I never overtly showed that unfriendly attitude towards others. I love his development to become a better person. He finally acknowledged his flaws and his mistakes. But still I was okay with him still being jealous and bitter even after his major character growth because that's what it means to be human. He has a crush on Danny, but Danny has a crush on Mark. It's not his mental state that makes me annoyed, but it's his actions. He's a cockblocker, not in the literal sense. Whenever he sees Danny getting close with Mark before the time skip, he often, if not, always does something to try and separate them. He even sometimes literally shouts. It's okay to be jealous, but becoming that obnoxious is not. He became better after the time skip when he was an adult. Around this time was the closest to Danny, not in terms of relationship but just contact. But even after he became an adult, I could not forget how obnoxious as a kid he was. It is suggested that he'll most likely end up with Danny, and I have nothing against that considering he was the one who stayed by her side, but sometimes I wish that ship didn't exist at all, but that's just my personal opinion. This may be out of topic, but I cannot help but say his adult design resembles Neely from Tales of Dragons and Demons. After someone pointed it out, I cannot unsee the fact that Neely looks like a combination of Naruto and Ichigo. Lastly, I really appreciated the several chapter epilogue. After reading a lot of manga, manhwa, and webtoon series, and even anime, I was very glad to see a story that doesn't end with one chapter or one episode after concluding the plot. I've seen too much, and I'm tired with that kind of writing. Sometimes many writers and readers use the term open ending conveniently, but to be honest, I do not care, even if it's closed-ended, if it still just ends in one chapter or so. I just want stories to explore the aftermath, one with actual substance and not just a montage of an epilogue. My prayers were answered by this comic. Not many do this, though I still wanted to see more of Dorian and Monica's relationship, especially their children. I am at least for once happy and satisfied. I did not mean this video to be long, but I guess I can sometimes be a chatterbox when I'm given a chance. There were other things I wanted to discuss, but I decided to make a pass. Dear Webtooners, thank you and goodbye for listening.